You're listening to Nothing's Off the Table, the podcast where no subject is too taboo to discuss. Now, please welcome your hosts, Andy Barker and Drew Del Pree. Welcome back, everybody, to Nothing's Off the Table, your Friday night source of entertainment, kind of, but not really. Anyway,
all three of you.
Yeah, right. It's entertaining for us. Anyway, welcome back, Lou. Middle Lou tonight, huh?
Yeah, I was Big Lou a couple weeks ago, Little Lou last week, and thought I'd be in the middle today. You know, I'm celebrating 3 in a row.
Oh,
3 shows in a row I was able to make.
You got that going for you, at least. Yeah. Well, tonight, our guest tonight is Mr. Nathan Segal. He's a best-selling author. He's got a fantastic story of a journey that he's gone through, and he's here to help us all learn how to not only avoid, but to deal with a narcissistic personality. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, it is.
Well, first of all,
welcome.
Yes, welcome, and thank you for being a part of this. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, what got you into this? Your journey.
It's rather bizarre. Well, number one, about 5-6 years ago, after my parents died, a friend of mine sent me a link to a video about covert narcissism, Ross Rosenberg. And I watched it, and I remember going, "Oh crap," because I realized that at that exact moment that my late mother was a covert narcissist. And also around that time, somebody sent me a checklist to do with covert narcissism, and I went through the list with my ex-girlfriend, and my mother tallied on every single one of the 15 points and the most extreme examples. Also realized that my father was the narcissist as well. And then, fast forward a few years, I wound up in a relationship with a woman who I later realized, actually only towards the end of the relationship did I realize that she was a narcissist. And so there were a whole bunch of things that happened. And we spoke a little bit about it earlier, but what led me into this direction was a friend of mine in Australia put up a post about a public speaking course. I signed up. And then I noticed it was a month away, and I wrote to him and I said, "Hey, it's a month away. How do I prepare?" And he said, "Well, think about your most transformative experience." And I said, "Well, I'm in the middle of it right now." And I started writing. And within 24 hours, I had a talk, and also realized I'd written a book. It was called Life After Bullying, which I could repurpose. And also, as I was writing, I felt a click inside me. And I suddenly realized that I was going to wind up talking with people about narcissistic abuse and how to recover from it. It's not so much how to avoid it, because that's, you would need a certain kind of training to be able to recognize the narcissist before they show up. Now, even though I grew up in a family with narcissists, I didn't recognize what this woman was doing because I'd never seen it before. I grew up with it. So there were all these things that a narcissist would do in the wild that I'd never seen before.
Mr. Segal,
see it. Yeah.
Before you go on, I think one thing's important to define for the audience, right? And
sure.
I think you're the best person. Well, certainly better than myself to talk about, right? But
Gary, no, sure.
Try not to be narcissistic. No, but that's what I wanted to bring up, though, was, right, there's a difference. And if you could just talk about the difference between a real and true narcissist, someone with, that NPC diagnosis, versus, the person in your life that's that just may be an occasional jerk, right? There's a big difference, right? Like, we throw around terms so loosely, right? But that term
That's
narcissist
true.
has a lot of real value, to people who have suffered under one.
Well, apparently there's a criteria to do with narcissism. There are all sorts of things to do with it. Grandiose or personality. They're never wrong. They will never take responsibility for anything that goes wrong in the relationship. Like in my direct experience, one of the things the narcissist was doing was she was hell-bent on destroying every single aspect of my personality that was good. She trashed me on every single front. They use things like gaslighting to and that happened multiple times. This woman used, like if she became angry with me, she would pull out something. It goes by a couple of different terms: the silent treatment or stonewalling, where they quite literally cut you off emotionally, and they won't talk to you or they barely acknowledge you. And this can go on for days, weeks, or months at a time. It's extremely painful if you ever go through it. And I've been through it a few times. And so these were all different things to do with the personality of the narcissist. And when I was looking at what happened to me and my ex, as near as I could tell, she came under the category of malignant narcissist. And if you're saying, well, why would you call her that? Well, the label malignant, it's not a diagnosis. It's I don't know, a way of describing. But one of the things that she had was a really sadistic aspect to her personality, where she was giving me hell one night over my past relationships. That's another thing they do. They grill you on your personal history so they can use it as a weapon against you. They weaponize sex. They do all sorts of stuff. And the whole purpose is to destroy you as a person. I don't know why they do this. To me, it's loopy, but that's what they do.
Loopy is the clinical term, actually, I believe, that's in the DSM.
Yeah, well, somebody told me recently that the DSM had removed narcissistic personality disorder now. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I never checked, but somebody said it's no longer in there because it's too prevalent. Like if you go on YouTube, as an example, and you do a search for the keyword narcissism, you're going to wind up with 12 million hits.
Sure.
It's huge. And there are tons of influencers out there all talking about it in so many different ways. And now just the pack. So
There's when years ago, I had I don't know how it happened, but I ended up doing drug and alcohol counseling in the Navy for about 3 years. And I used to have a rational recovery class. And I remember looking in the DSM-4, right? That's how long ago this was, because I know we're around 5 now. But I remember looking in the DSM-4, and the physician pulled me over, and we were talking about one of the patients, whether they had narcissistic tendencies or not. And he shows me this line in the DSM-4, and it says, "Thinks other people think." And then he stopped right there, and he goes, "I don't need to read any further." He goes, "Just remember that. Thinks other people think."
Badly.
Constantly.
There's a paranoid aspect to it. And I remember seeing that in my ex, all sorts of really severe behaviors. And there were a lot of red flags, but I made the same mistake with her that I made with my family. And since you've been on my YouTube channel, you've seen some of what I've done. My number one video, which I only posted 2 weeks ago, it's called The Number One Narcissistic Lie. And it's what my family did to me. And at one point, quite a number of years ago, I was working with a neuro-linguistic programming coach. And she kept telling me my family was broken, but I didn't believe her. And I thought that if I could fix whatever it was, and I'd been looking for this for decades, trying to fix this thing, that if I could fix it, I would have the kind and loving family that I always wanted. But what happened, like fast forward a bit, I wound up having a major fight with my mother and brother. I became violently sick afterwards, and I didn't think I was going to make it. It wasn't until I did recover a month later that I realized how sick I'd actually been. But then my coach gave me an exercise. She asked me to write out a timeline of the abuse. And I spent 4 hours. I covered 30 years. And then I sat down and started reading what I wrote. And as I was reading, a thought popped into my head, which was, why am I still talking to these people? And the immediate answer was, because you're family. And then I had the insight that changed my life. I realized, but if I removed the label of family, I would have ended this relationship decades ago. I would never have allowed any friend to treat me the way that you do. And when I look at where I am, I'm long overdue to get out. And every time we get together, there's violence and threats of ongoing manipulation. And so right after that, I wrote to my coach and I said to her, I need your help in writing a PFO letter. And if you're wondering what that stands for, well, I'll try and be polite with this. It stands for please frig off. It's not exactly what I said, but
I'm pretty sure. In fact, I will. I'll lay down a bet right now. I'll give
yeah.
you $20 if you could offend either Lou or I.
Oh, it's not about you. It's about your audience. But
Thank you.
it's PFLO letter stands for please fuck off.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. Now, if you're wondering why, I'm from Canada. We're polite.
Hey,
Yes, I appreciate that.
But in the letter, I took responsibility for my own part in what was going on. I also said to them, this abuse is not going to stop unless I stop it. And at that moment, I made the decision to go permanent no contact with them because I realized that I'd been conned. I realized that what my coach had told me was correct, that my family was broken, that the situation was irreparable. And one of the things that a lot of people get stuck with these bloody narcissists is if the narcissist says, oh, I'm going to go to therapy and blah, blah, blah. And then the person who was involved with them gets the idea, oh, if I can help them fix this, then I'll have it's the same con game. And I lost 30 years of my life to that one. And so part of my message when I did that video is telling people, whatever you do, don't fall for this. If you do, you're going to waste years of your life, maybe decades like me. And you don't want to do that. You cannot fix this situation. As Dr. Phil has said, actually, in one of his videos, it's above your pay grade. You can't do it. You can't.
you know, we joke a lot, but there's a lot of truth to what we say when we say you can't fix crazy.
No. I mean, the only thing that could happen is if the person has enough awareness that they realize that something's wrong. Now, there are two influencers on YouTube that I've encountered, a black guy and this white guy. I think he's in his 30s, maybe early 40s. And they both describe themselves as self-aware narcissists. But they do know that they are narcissists. They've been clinically diagnosed, and they're online educating people about this disorder. And it's really amazing to watch these guys, like the black dude. He calls himself Mental Healness, I think. And they're both brilliant, and I really enjoy listening to them, and I've learned so much from both of them.
Right. Now, you mentioned an interesting term that I think is going to fascinate some people: covert narcissism. And if I have an understanding of that, and I'm very rudimentary, so fill in the blanks. But my understanding of that is, when you say the narcissist, nothing is ever their fault. The covert narcissist will admit fault, but they do not believe it. That is a cover. That's a cover.
I honestly don't know. I mean, when I encountered this was like 6 years ago after my parents died, and a guy sent me a link to a video to do with Ross Rosenberg, and it was about covert narcissism.
You recommended it, and I watched it, and I recommend it to others. I recommend you to check out Mr. Segal's channel and watch his videos. But that recommended video on Rosenberg was good. Was very interesting and complimentary.
Yeah, it was interesting. There were a number of things about it. I'm just trying to remember something to do with my mother. Well, growing up, because I had these dynamics playing out with my parents, I used to refer to and I never shared this with anybody. You're the first ones to hear about it. But I'd invented all these terms to describe my parents and their personalities, which I thought were part of bipolar disorder, which is supposedly in my family, but I think it's a better match for the narcissism as far as I can tell. But I used to refer to my mother as the subtle saboteur. She was very good at undermining people and stabbing them in the back. And she did that to me repeatedly over the years. And the other aspect of this thing is I was also targeted as a family scapegoat. So I had a double whammy in a whole bunch of different ways. And I fought back against the family for many years. But when I realized that I'd been conned all those years ago, it as one of my friends put it to me, he told me that the reason I'd been susceptible to a cult when I was 19, he said, it's because you were living in one. Your parents were cult leaders. And that made a lot of sense to me. And so there were all these dynamics going on. And it was only after my parents died that I got that information. And then I realized my situation was much worse than I thought. And that I was lucky that I was still alive, because they nearly killed me with their abuse multiple times.
You mentioned a cult.
Yeah.
What cult were you a part of, or susceptible to?
The official name for them is Born Again Christians, but the particular group way back in the day was First Assembly Pentecostal Church in Calgary. But but what they did, I mean, it was a crazy journey, because after I got out, I became friends with a guy by the name of Mike Cropfeld, who runs the Citizens Information Center in Montreal. And somewhere along the line, I got access to the internal documents of a group called the Messianic Jewish Movement International. So the guy that got me in used some tracts from that movement. But at one point, I got access to their training manual. And one of my friends who was really familiar with different cult groups at the time, he said, this bloody thing reads like the Moonies training manual. And it was a detailed training manual of fraud and deception to trick Jews into becoming a part of this movement. And it was wild. I had access to all sorts of information. So
that is wild.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I had somebody on the show named Rick Ross. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but
don't know the name now.
He's a gentleman that specialized in cults, but deprogramming, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a fascinating interview.
Yeah, I went through that. At one point, after my parents got me out of it, I remember looking online, or not online, not back then, but I somehow found out about a place in the States. My folks took me there, and I went through deprogramming as well. Huh. And my deprogramming managed to scare the shit out of me at one point. And the way that he did it, he played the last tapes of Jonestown.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That'll do it.
Just before they committed suicide, And there was
they may
that,
be up there. We don't know that.
Speaking of drinking the Kool-Aid, wow.
Yeah, well, I front seat experience to the aftermath, if you will, but yeah, my deprogramming managed to scare the shit out of me at one point, and that's when he was able to get through to me. And after that, I became an expert on mind control. So we fast forward to where we've been for the last few years, the scamdemic that many people call it.
Oh.
When it happened, I instantly recognized it, but it took me a while to figure it out. And once I did, I wrote an article called, "If You've Been Scared by the Coronavirus, You're Suffering from the Effects of Mind Control." It went into a local newspaper here in Mexico, got 3,000 hits in 16 hours. They asked me to write more. I did. I turned it into a book, and I got banned on Amazon for writing it. I kid you not. It's true. I can show you the screenshots. It was just like, wow.
Unfortunately, I have no problems believing you. We don't judge at all on this show. In fact, if anything else, the experiences that you went through have made you a stronger and better person. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, this last thing that happened, like with the ex-girlfriend and the narcissism, this is going to sound weird, but she actually helped me, because what it did, and I didn't realize this until I started writing this thing out, it created, it's like it tied everything up. And all of a sudden I understood a whole bunch of stuff that I'd never understood before. And contrary to her succeeding and really breaking me, actually, no, it had the reverse effect. And in many ways, I'm much stronger than I was before I went into the relationship, if that makes any sense at all.
Are you, have you ever been told that you're empathic by any chance?
Yes, highly empathic, actually. And that makes me a target for narcissists. That's the type of person they're looking for. And like in one of my videos, it's maybe a bit of a side note, but It has to do with the common thing that shows up in therapy, and where the therapist will say to the victim, "Why did you choose a narcissist?" And I'm here to say that that is, well, bullshit, in my opinion. You didn't choose the narcissist. The narcissist is a predator, and
Yes.
they're on the
Yes.
and they have a predetermined set of criteria that they're looking for. And if you happen to fall into that criteria, you're going to get targeted. And unless you know how to protect yourself against a narcissist, you're fair game. And I've been talking about
Yeah.
this a bit as of late, but it's super important because there's a lot of victim shaming and crap that goes on about this. And I'm going, this has to stop. I mean, the people who get targeted, people like me, are innocent. We don't know anything. We're not prepared. Our society has not prepared us for how to
No.
tell that somebody's a psychopath or a sociopath or a narcissist. You know, even though I grew up in it, there were certain things I didn't see because I grew up in it. My
Right.
parents didn't do some of the things that you would find with a narcissist in the wild. So when I saw it, I was completely unprepared for it. I didn't know what I was seeing.
Well,
I
you
think that's an. Oh, well, I was going to say, I think it's important. You know, we can't stress enough. You know, it is a problem, and if you become aware of a narcissist that's in your life, you know, you have to. You know, the best defense is to get away, because
This is true. Yeah.
you are absolute fodder to that. You don't, you exist as a stepping stone, or some type of, basically you're not a person to them. You know, and so they don't.
You are what they call narcissistic supply. If they
Yes,
can get
yes.
their hooks into you, they're going to create all sorts of problems and drama, which they feed off of. And, you know, growing up, one of the things that I'd always wondered about, I had this huge fascination with vampires and all this kind of stuff. And I later discovered only in recent years that the narcissists are a form of vampire, a psychological, emotional vampire,
Yeah.
and they will suck the life out of you if they can. And if you wind up with one, that's one of the things that they're after, and they do. And so now it's like, that's what I mean by all these things kind of came together. And it's like, oh, I get it. Now I understand. And it's put me in a prime position to really be able to help people with getting away from these people and recovering. And there were so many things that happened over the years. And if you had told me that at some point you're going to be doing this, I'm going, you must be joking. And no way would I sign up for this, but these things happen. And it's like I said, I felt a click inside, and all of a sudden I knew.
I think
And it was,
Andy and I knew a narcissist in Japan, and I mean, well, he probably doesn't know who I'm referring to now because they were so plentiful.
I was about to say you're going to have to
yeah,
narrow
well,
that down.
But my point is that, like, one thing I want to say though is, to people, like, what I used to say, when I tried to bring it to this person's attention, I was like, listen, it's like you're on a speedboat on a lake. Everything looks calm because you're looking forward. You're not seeing what you're doing to everybody behind you. You know, he
well,
didn't think his behavior was a problem, and I said, that's because the lake is calm in front of you. Turn around.
Can you tell me who it is
He wouldn't.
without telling me who it is?
No, I don't want to say.
Okay,
You know,
fair enough.
because actually, the three people that listen would know him because they know us.
Fair enough.
But yeah, but I do. I think the analogy. I think that's one of the better analogies, you know, that I've used in my life is when you're around those people. You know, they're unaware because in front of them it's calm. The plan is going as it's supposed to go. I've done nothing wrong. And there's nothing but good times ahead unless you're in the way. You know, so everything's
yeah,
calm and everything's good. And it's like this wake behind them that has disrupted
wreckage.
everything in the lake. And it just gets bigger and bigger the faster they go.
I've never heard anyone describe it that way, but it who knows? I mean, it's as good an analogy as any. And but yes, they leave a lot of wreckage, and it depends on who you talk to. Some of these people who exhibit this behavior are aware of what they're doing, and a lot of them aren't. But one of the things that, like, if you listen to someone like Dr. Ramani, if I remember correctly. She said they absolutely do know what they're doing. How did they? And she said, why? Because they are aware that their behavior would be frowned upon by society, and they go to great lengths to hide it.
Mm.
And that shows
Excellent
that they
point.
are aware, at least to some degree, that what they're doing is not acceptable.
Just for the record, I did look it up, and narcissism and all of its subsets were removed from the DSM, as well as the
Oh, wow.
ICD-9 or the ICD-10, which
That's interesting.
it's criminal
Yeah,
to me.
I agree with you. I mean, the situation is much worse than people know.
Yeah.
Like if you go to YouTube, and this was part of my research before all of this happened, but if you do a search for the keyword narcissism, you will get 12 million hits.
Mm.
And if you do another search for narcissistic personality disorder, 14 million hits.
Wow.
And then if you look deeper, you'll find a whole bunch of influencers out there talking about it in one way or another. I mean, I'm coming into it in a very narrow way. I'm not doing what a lot of these people are doing. I have a completely different approach.
Tell us about it.
Well, what I'm talking about, like one of my videos is how to get over a narcissist in 21 days or less. Now, if you're looking at that going, where in the world did you get that from? Well, it had to do with part of my journey. Like years ago, I went through a really painful breakup, been suffering for a couple of years. I'd been looking online for a solution. And I found a guy by the name of Farouk Radwan, who has a site called To Know Myself, the number 2, Know Myself. And on there, he has a book called How to Get Over Anyone in a Few Days. Well, I bought it. And it's full of neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis and psychology and lots of educational stuff. But basically, he says, if you buy this book and you follow the directions, you will recover from your ex in a few days. So I followed it and I recovered in 18 days. Now, if you're wondering, well, what did you do? Well, there are a few things in the book. And here's a really important thing to know. You go through a breakup, you can be 95% sure that the relationship is over, but you might have 5% hope. And that 5% hope is that, well, maybe I can fix it. Maybe we can recover. Maybe we can rekindle. That 5% hope is going to keep you trapped and quite possibly for years. Now, the purpose of the book, what it walks you through, is destroying all hope, destroying that 5%.
That sounds like marriage right off the bat.
I don't know, but I do know that part of it has to do with going back to your ex and having certain dialogues with them and asking certain questions based on the book. And once you get to a certain point, you'll realize that the hope is gone. And when it's gone, you recover really fast. And so, in terms of what I'm doing involving these people who have been hurt by the narcissist, the typical advice you'll get is you got to get out of there, get the hell out of Dodge, and go no contact. And I'm coming from a standpoint where that's a major mistake. And the reason why is because if you haven't broken the bond with the narcissist, you're still in that loop. You're going to be very vulnerable. And there's a good chance that in a moment of weakness, you could go back. But this book is all about breaking that emotional tie. Now, you break that emotional tie, then you go no contact. And the likelihood that you'll stick to it is much higher than it would be if you did it the other way around. And so that's where I'm coming from with this. And my whole purpose with people is like, I'm focusing on a very narrow group, people who have either left the narcissist or are in the process of leaving. Not interested in anybody who's still with the narcissist and all that drama. It would be like putting a tiny Band-Aid on a gaping wound. It's a waste of time. But those people who are leaving or have left, those are the people I can help.
Well, there goes my next question.
Why? What was it?
I was going to ask you if you had any advice for someone that felt that they couldn't leave the situation.
Well, there are a lot of people who well, it depends on the situation. The number one problem with that would be somebody who's had children with a narcissist and they say, I can't leave. But that's in my opinion, that's a victim mentality, and I don't buy it. You can leave if you really want to. There are consequences always, but you know, if you're willing to take responsibility, it's like to step back a little bit and go in a different direction. Jack Canfield, The Success Principles. The very first chapter is you must take 100% responsibility for your life. That's a really tough one for a lot of people to swallow, and many people can't. But if you're coming from the standpoint of being 100% responsible, you'll find a way. There are ways. There are ways to make this thing work and to protect it. But the key thing is you've got to get away from the narcissist in one way or another. You've got to create distance, because if you don't, the likelihood of you healing from that are very low, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the bottom line is the expression, where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. And then there's
That's
the
my
other,
way of thinking. What's that?
I think I was gonna say I think part of the other issue too is um in a lot of these problems, society almost works against us. And I'll
Yes, it
give you
does.
I'll give you an example, sort of not in the narcissistic realm, but another controversial type of example. I did work in mental health for a while. I don't consider myself a mental health expert, but I had to sit in lectures by them, to maintain, our in-service training or whatever, right? And
Sure.
on one of the lectures, they were talking about sexual assault,
Yeah.
and the man just said, um, you know, we can't today. It's inappropriate today to tell someone, if you want to be treated like a lady, behave like a lady. It's inappropriate to say that. He said, however, after the sexual assault, we are going to spend a year talking about how you should behave like a lady. That's what we're going to
Really.
do. In therapy, he said, because part of the therapy is getting back control of your life, and you're going to go through decision making.
True, but
And he said,
part of getting over something is admitting that it actually happened.
and
And that,
so I just
and
yeah, it's
yeah,
how they work against us. Like, we can't put these messages out early, because if we do, we're insensitive, or it may not be processed correctly, or we may not be the best messenger
okay.
for some of this stuff. Unfortunately, some people have to be victimized in order to realize they're a victim.
Well,
I don't know. Does that make sense?
yes and no. There's something else that this
Please,
brings
please.
up, and it's a huge can of worms. We're talking about
Right.
political correctness.
Yes,
And
it is.
what I would like to suggest to both of you, there is a video on YouTube. It's been on there for a while. If you do a search for, I forget exactly the title, either the origins or the history of political correctness, you will find a video from the late 50s or 60s. It's 22 and a half minutes long, and it talks about where all this crap came from. And I watched it many, many times, and it is the root cause of all this garbage that we're going through now. And I am one of the most politically incorrect people you will ever meet. And I refuse to bow to it, because I know what I'm seeing. And the political correctness, and apologies if I'm digressing, but it's very important. The political correctness is a Marxist doctrine. And the purpose of it is to undermine and destroy our society so that the workers' paradise of communism can rise from the ashes.
Yes.
I'm not making this up.
No,
You'll find
No,
all of
you're
it
not.
when you look at this video. But this is the root cause of all of this stuff. You have to behave like a lady. Give me a freaking break.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I call bullshit big time on this. But I've seen this kind of stuff going on. That's where the victim shaming and other stuff
Right.
comes in.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't talk about things. You can't bring things up. We were talking earlier again, we are going down a rabbit hole, and this will be my last foot in it. But the Brookings Institute says to get out of generational poverty, there's 3 things you have to do. Don't get pregnant in high school, graduate, get a job, and get married. If you do those 3 things, then you will be out of generational poverty. But those are the 3 things you can't bring up in school. You can't talk about, abstinence programs. That stuff's been knocked out of schools. You can't talk about,
Yeah.
hey, it's 2 incomes are better than 1. You can't talk about those things.
again, this is all hearkening back to the whole political correctness thing. This is where so much of this stuff is coming from. If you guys watch that video, it'll
Did
give you a deeper understanding of what's actually happening and where all this crap is coming from.
did that video? Is that the video that interviews a former KGB agent? Is
No,
that,
that's
no,
the Yuri
okay.
Bezmenov thing. That I think it's Bezmenov. No, that's a different video entirely. The video starts with a guy who's got like a really bad hairstyle, starting off talking about, and in America, there are some things you cannot say, otherwise you wind up in trouble.
Yeah.
And it goes into this long thing, and political correctness came from primarily a group of Jewish Marxists, where they found, I think they were originally in Germany at a place that came to be known as the Frankfurt School, but then they wound up at, I believe, at Columbia University.
Mhm.
And that's where they did a lot of this stuff. And
Hard
I
to
mean,
believe
it's a very
that
short
bastion of
video.
liberty, Columbia.
Right.
Yeah, well, yeah, wee bit of sarcasm there, but yeah, I mean, so much of what's going on, it can be traced back to that.
Sure.
And the reason I know about it is because of something else that was bizarre that happened. I wound up helping a guy who was a former auditor with the Canada Revenue Agency. He wrote a book called The Tax Collector's Bible. He had a website promoting the book, and I was part of his affiliate program, and he had all these videos on his site, and that was one of them. Or
Oh,
I
nice.
think it was, actually. Somebody told me
Interesting.
about it, one of my expat friends. I
Hey,
forget
so
where I got it from.
well, I have a question I've been dying to ask, but it's really as you found out, it's very easy to pull my string. But tell me about your coach, like what a coach is, how you found your coach, or how you
Oh,
connected, and how can other people connect with coaches?
well, in this case, I remember, so I forget exactly what I did, but it had to do with hitting a point in my life to do with money and finances. And I remember uh, getting up from my chair, metaphorically drawing a line on the ground. I literally traced it out with my finger. And I said, so long as I am of sound mind and sound body, I will never let this happen again. Then I went online. Sorry, I'm hearing somebody tapping. I did a search for NLP, prosperity, and something else. And I found it. Sorry, somebody's banging on the wall here. I don't know who it is. Anyway,
Who is it?
yeah, exactly. You want to be let
Housekeeping.
in? Anyway, I found a video from Self-Sabotage to Self-Made Millionaire by a guy by the name of Rick Schnabel.
Oh,
And there was an offer for coaching, and I signed up for it. And that's when I got introduced to Rick Schnabel, Hamish Baston, and later a guy by the name of Matt Tate, who became my coach. I did a number of sessions with him last summer. One thing led to another. I became friends with Hamish, with Rick, with Matt, and these two, especially Rick and Matt, had been after me for at least a couple of years to become a coach, to become a speaker. But I'm going, I don't have anything to talk about. And then this thing happened a month ago, and all of a sudden everything changed. And now all of a sudden I have a purpose, I have a reason, I have a direction. And I realized I had enough material for a TED Talk, and I'm actually pursuing avenues about how to do that.
yeah,
Because
that'd be awesome.
like the number one thing I'm talking about is the number one narcissistic lie, because so many people have fallen for this just like me. And a major thing that I want to do is warn people, get that message out there, because a lot of people need to hear it.
Now, is your coach? Are they considered a life coach, or?
That's a good question. They are, let me think, master coaches in neurolinguistic programming. That's where I found them.
Okay.
So prosperity, abundance, NLP, neurolinguistic programming. That's how I found them. And I've had a huge interest in NLPs. It's one of the best forms of therapy that I've ever encountered. I really like it a lot.
I just asked that because I'm currently going back to school, and my degree is in human services with an emphasis on counseling and life coaching. So,
Oh, okay.
I didn't know if
Well,
that's
I would definitely recommend this for sure, and maybe a dive into hypnosis as well. It, you know, I don't really know what to say about it, but for me personally, now that I'm on this journey, probably going to take some more training in NLP. I mean, I have access to a whole bunch of tools, but a deeper dive into NLP would be good.
I'm gonna NLP is in November Lima Papa. Is that correct?
Yes, November Lima Papa. Yeah,
All
you
right.
know your phonetic alphabet too.
Should hope
You
so.
must have been involved with flying a radio at some point.
Well, I think Lou and between the two of us, Lou and I, we have over 50 years combined military service. So
Yeah.
I would do it.
It's funny. I was just
I,
telling somebody
I,
earlier
I never
today.
served I never served in the military, but I know this because of taking flight training.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Phonetic alphabet you have to use.
yeah, bingo.
Bingo. That's a bad thing, right? For a pilot.
Yeah,
Bingo fuel.
bingo. Yeah, that's funny. As soon as you said that, I knew exactly what you meant. Yeah, the lowest amount of fuel that you have to make it back to the base. That's right.
It's not in a good spot to be.
Well,
No.
that's why you say bingo, and then you turn around and go back home because if you push it, you're going to wind up in the ocean.
Right. Bingo and factor, right? If you're a factor, you have to go up and left. Everybody has to go up and left.
I haven't heard that one. I don't
That's
know
the
that
jet
one.
pilots told me. They said if you're going to be a factor, it means you're going to contact. So if somebody calls factor, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. Just up and left, and that way you're guaranteed not to hit each other.
I was gonna say it's probably
If you're both
strictly
coming
military.
at each other and you both go up and left, you'll
Yeah. Yeah.
shouldn't hit.
Cool story, Lou.
Yeah. I mean, for me, with my training, it is like you do a hard right. If you see
that
a
might be
dot
it,
in
yeah.
the middle of your windscreen, not moving but growing steadily larger, you're on a collision course. That happened to me once, and I saw it. I instantly recognized it. Said to my seatmate, "We're on a collision course." And I did a hard right at the same time that the other pilot did the same thing. And he passed overhead. He was so close that I could count the treads in his tires and see the rivets in the wings.
Holy
We
smokes.
were close. Yeah, we were at a closing speed of over 300 miles an hour when we did that. If we had hit, there would have been just pieces everywhere.
Wow. So are you
Yeah.
rated single engine only, or what are you rated to fly?
Multi-engine,
Well, cool.
and night and mountain.
Oh, that's awesome. It's
I didn't get
something
my IFR.
I've always wanted to do it. I just never did. And
Down
now
here, trying to ride a horse. Just signed up.
I did it when I was a kid. I got my driver's license and my private license when I was 17.
that's amazing.
It was cool.
So
fine.
you're obviously an overachiever. So you got that going for you.
Yeah.
Putting the rest of us to shame. I like it.
Well,
That's cool.
it's just what I did,
Yeah.
So
It's not like I set out to do these. Well, I did, but it wasn't like I set out to be a certain way. Certain things happen and I just went with it.
I don't think did we even mention your book at all? We talked about your
Nope.
videos and we've talked
Nope.
about your past, but let's talk about your book.
Yeah.
Well, the book is called Life After Bullying. And I wrote about, it was all about my experiences growing up. And it's about adult bullies, how to deal with them, how to get away from them, how to keep yourself safe online, and how to set really good boundaries that stick. And for me, the number one hardest boundary that I had to enforce was no contact.
That's super hard because especially when it's family, because everyone always says how family is so important, and it is. But what's more important is recognizing your own mental health, and sometimes you got to let it go.
Well, it's really tough. Like in my situation, like looking back on it, like it's a taboo, right? It's a major taboo in our society, and I've been told by a number of people, suck it up, but I couldn't. Like, what do you do if your family are your worst enemies? What do you do if they undermine you at every turn? What do you do if they go out of their way to hurt you every chance they get? would you put up with it, or would you be like a surgeon removing a malignant tumor? And when I got to the point and realized that my family was broken, that I in fact had been conned by everybody, that's when I realized it's over. And I slammed the door. And it was very hard to do. And I was in a lot of emotional pain for years. And I also knew I made the right decision. Absolutely no doubt. And I still feel that way today.
I have certain friends. Lou is actually one of them that they're closer to me than some of my actual family. And I love it when people tell me, well, you know, blood's thicker than water. And my response is always, yeah, but blood clots. You know?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there are a lot of taboos to do with family. And I ran headlong into those. And there were some people who were determined to keep me in the family dynamic. But it got to a point where the pain became so severe that I couldn't stand it anymore. And like I said, they nearly killed me several times with their abuse. And the last time I was sick for a month and I didn't know if I was going to make it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like this violence happened many times. And when it did, I would be bedridden and sick for weeks. And I can't remember how many times it happened, but that last time I was sick for a month and I didn't know if I was going to make it.
Every person
like talking like this, I really don't, but it's the truth. And if it makes people uncomfortable, I get it, but it's reality, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was real. It was my life. I had to put it this way. If I hadn't gone no contact, I would be dead because they damn nearly killed me the last time.
Every person has their limit and has a breaking point.
Yep. That was my breaking point.
And it's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of.
No.
The important part is what you're doing now. And like you said, it may be painful. It may be difficult to listen to, but the fact that you're talking about it is promoting not only your healing, but it's helping others out there that may or may not be in that same situation. So don't take what you're doing lightly, because I think it's very therapeutic and it's very, very helpful for your own mental health and your own healing process.
Yeah, like one piece of advice I would give to everybody who's listening, and it's what happened to me when I was doing this. I remember like writing things out is very helpful because you get it out of your head and you get it on paper, and then you can more clearly see what's going on. And I had an intuition when I started writing this talk that if I did it, it would help me, because another long-standing problem I've had is called dissociative amnesia. And the last episode I had was the worst by far. And I lost like 40% of who I was for like 13 years. And I only recovered that about 8 or 9 months ago. Now, when I was writing this out, I had this intuition that it would help with this sense of floating pieces in my mind. And what was really interesting about it is, you know, I wrote the talk out, had a really good night's sleep. I woke up the next morning, I took a really deep breath, and I suddenly realized that I felt whole for the first time in decades. No missing pieces, no dangly bits, no aspects of my personality that were off somewhere. And I still feel like that now.
Amazing.
It's been almost a month later. And so for people who are watching this, journaling will really help you. Journaling helps you make sense of what's going on, because when you're thinking about stuff, you get lost in the mind. And you can't see what's really happening until you write it down. And there's a process that I use. It's called the work of Byron Katie. It's called inquiry, self-inquiry, where you inquire into your thoughts to find out what's real or what isn't. It's extremely helpful. And it's part of what I do to help people.
Well, the writing definitely helps keep the thoughts organized, and it keeps the distractions to a minimum.
Yes, it does.
I agree with that 100%. I don't know how to write, so I'm kind of screwed from that aspect. But give me a crayon, I might be able to.
Sure. You can type.
Well, that's debatable. I'll get my kids. Hey, come down here. Daddy needs help. But hey, look at what time it is, Lou.
Yes, sir.
Uh-oh. It's
I'm
that
ready.
time.
Hey, Mr. Segal,
This
don't go anywhere. Even when we stop the show, stay with us. We want to say goodbye after.
okay. Well, it's that time of the show where we highlight a veterans organization that is out there helping other veterans, and we're talking nonprofit organizations. So if you're out there for money, well, we're not going to highlight you. But Lou, what do you got for us this week?
All right, guys. So today we're going to look at the Veterans Breakfast Club. I had the opportunity to check them out last month at their monthly breakfast in PA. They vary the locations. They also have an online forum for people if you can't get to one of the live breakfasts. Before I read what they say they do, I'll just tell you about what my experience was. So I got there, lowered the average age in the room by about 20 years. So come on, guys. I know there were veterans around my age. Okay, it was a 20-year war. All right, let's start supporting some of our organizations. They could really use the help. But anyway, I got there. Really cool group of guys, all services represented. World War II, couple vets. Korea, couple vets. And we had a lot of Vietnam vets and a couple of us in the modern wars, if you will. And they basically did a slideshow and had a different person. They had about 3 people come up and sort of talk about their tours wherever they may have been. So one person talked about Korea, and they had a couple of pictures of him when he was young in his uniform, and they just told their story. And then they would ask questions, and go around the room. And if you had a comment or you wanted to ask a question, you could participate. And it was veterans talking to other veterans and listening to people's stories. So it was really cool. So now here's what they say. Veterans Breakfast Club harnesses the power of storytelling to build a nation that understands the values, the experiences of our military veterans. We hold weekly programs online and in person where veterans of all eras, ages, and branches of service can share their stories with the public. These events create close-knit communities of listening, and by recording the events, we ensure that our living history will never be forgotten. I forgot to mention that they do stress bring pictures because they will keep them, digitize them, and get them filed. Anyway, check them out. It's veteransbreakfastclub.org, veteransbreakfastclub.org. Get on the schedule, and hit up their next online events. Really cool. Really, really cool place to go and hang out with other guys.
And you get to eat.
Gals. And you get to eat. You get breakfast.
And you get to eat. It's my favorite part. Awesome. Hey, thanks. This is my favorite part of the podcast, and I don't mean to take anything away from the guests that we have, but the different organizations that are out there supporting our brothers and sisters means so much to me. And I have to give credit where credit is due. And this is all Lou's idea for the show, and it's a fantastic one that we're going to keep it. As long as we're doing this, it's important to me, and I know it's important to a lot of others. But anyway, Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the show. I learned a lot. It's fascinating stuff. I'm really fascinated by the abnormal psychology, all the different aspects of it. But please stick around. We're going to bring us out, stay in the room with us, and we would like to talk to you. And thank you again for being on the show. Any parting words, and where can people find your stuff at?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name Nathan Segal. You can find me on Facebook. Same thing. My email address is visualartist49@gmail.com. And as for a number, 650-614-1834.
Excellent. Again, I can't thank you enough. Lou, I'm going to leave you the final word.
Oh, hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. Check us out. Appreciate all the subscriptions since we started running this. We'll keep the content coming. Love you. See you next week.
Bye-bye.